My husband's family stopped speaking to me the day I refused to hand over my bakery. That was 3 years ago. Last Thursday, my mother-in-law walked through the front door of my second location, the one in Midtown, sat down at a corner table, and ordered a coffee like nothing had ever happened. Then she slid a legal document across the table and told me to sign it before closing time. I smiled at her, and what I said next made her go completely silent. But before I get to that, I need to take you back to how this all started. Because the story of how I ended up sitting across from the woman who once called me a failure in the middle of the business she swore would collapse without her son, that story matters. My name is June Whitfield. I'm 32 years old. I own 2 bakeries in Atlanta, Georgia. One in Decatur, which I opened 6 years ago, and one in Midtown, which I opened 14 months back. Before either of those existed, I was a pastry chef working 60-hour weeks for someone else's restaurant group, saving every dollar I could, sketching floor plans in a notebook I kept under my bed. My mother-in-law's name is Beverly. My husband, my ex-husband now, is Aaron. We met when I was 25. He was kind, or at least he seemed that way in the beginning. His family owned a small chain of dry cleaning businesses in the suburbs. Not wealthy exactly, but comfortable. They had opinions about everything, and they shared them freely. The first time I told Beverly about my plan to open a bakery, she looked at me the way you'd look at a child who denounced they wanted to be a mermaid when they grew up. "Bakery's close," she said plainly. "The margins are brutal. Aaron needs someone stable." I smiled and said, "I'll make it work." She didn't believe me. Neither did Aaron, really, though he was too polite to say it out loud then. I opened the Decatur shop 3 years into our marriage. I'd saved $40,000 on my own. I'd taken a small business loan. I'd spent 8 months negotiating a lease, finding equipment, testing recipes, hiring 2 people I trusted. Aaron contributed nothing financially. We'd agreed on that because the business was mine. That felt clean to me. Clear. The first year was brutal. There were months I paid my staff before I paid myself. There were weeks I worked from 4 in the morning until 9 at night and came home too tired to eat. Beverly made a point of mentioning every bakery that closed in the metro area. "Did you see that place on Ponce shut down?" she'd say at Sunday dinners. "It's a yoga studio now." Aaron never defended me. He'd just changed the subject. But I kept going. By year 2, we had a line out the door on weekend mornings. A food blogger with a decent following wrote about our brown butter croissants and things shifted overnight. By year 3, we were profitable. Genuinely, clearly profitable. I hired a manager. I started looking at a second location. That's when Beverly's attitude changed. Not toward me, toward the bakery. Suddenly she was interested. She started coming in on Saturday mornings, sitting at the counter, chatting up my regulars. She mentioned to a few of them that she was involved with the business. She wasn't. She had never once set foot in the kitchen or contributed a single dollar. Then came the dinner. It was a Sunday in October 2.5 years ago. Aaron and I had just signed the lease on the Midtown space. I was exhausted and proud. I told his family over pasta that we'd be opening a second location the following spring. Beverly set down her fork. "How much capital do you need?" she asked. I told her I'd already secured financing. She looked at Aaron. Some silent thing passed between them. Then she said, very calmly, "Aaron and I have been talking. We think the family should be involved going forward. Protect the investment." I put down my own fork. "What investment?" "You haven't invested anything." Beverly smiled the way people do when they think you're being deliberately obtuse. The family name, the support, 3 years of Sundays. I looked at Aaron. He wasn't meeting my eyes. "What does involved mean?" I asked. Beverly slid a folded piece of paper across the table. I opened it. It was handwritten. A list of terms. A 30% ownership stake in both locations, transferred to a family LLC she'd apparently already formed. In exchange, nothing. No capital. No labor. Just the honor of their association. The room was quiet. Aaron's father stared at his plate. Aaron finally looked up at me, and what I saw in his face was not apology. It was expectation. He actually thought I was going to say yes. "No," I said. Beverly blinked. "Excuse me?" No, I built this without any help from this family. I'm not signing over 30% of anything, Aaron said quietly. June, can we just talk about it? There's nothing to talk about. That was the last real dinner I ever had with his family. Within 2 weeks, Beverly had stopped speaking to me. Aaron's sister followed. His father called me once to say I was being unreasonable and selfish, and then he stopped calling too. Aaron didn't leave immediately, but he also never defended me. He spent the next several months making me feel like I'd done something wrong, like gratitude required me to hand over what I'd built. Like family loyalty was a debt I owed in stock certificates. I filed for divorce 11 months later. In the settlement, Aaron asked for partial ownership of the Decatur bakery. He claimed that 3 years of living together constituted a contribution to its success. My attorney, a woman named Patricia Cross, who wore the same pearl earrings every day and did not lose, argued otherwise. We had documented everything, the loan in my name only, the original business registration, payroll records, every purchase order. Aaron had contributed nothing to the business. The judge agreed. He walked away with nothing from the bakery. I heard through mutual friends that Beverly described me as calculating and cold. I heard she told people I had tricked Aaron into a prenuptial agreement, which was false. We hadn't had one, and I hadn't needed one because the paperwork was simply in order. I also heard she told people the Midtown location would fail. It didn't fail. By the time we opened in Midtown, I had a head pastry chef I trusted completely, a manager who'd been with me since year 1, and a wholesale account with 2 hotel groups downtown. The opening week had a 2-hour wait on Saturday morning. A local magazine ran a feature. We were solidly booked for private events 3 months out. I didn't speak to Aaron or Beverly or anyone in that family for nearly 3 years. Until last Thursday, I was at the Midtown location doing a walkthrough before the afternoon rush. My manager came to find me in the back. He looked uncertain, which is unusual for him. He's the kind of person who handles everything without blinking. "There's a woman asking for you," he said. "She says she's family." I went still. "What does she look like?" He described her. 60-something. Paroles. Beige blazer. The posture of someone who has never second-guessed herself in her life. "Beverly?" I took a breath. "Put her at the corner table. Tell her I'll be out in a few minutes." I wasn't afraid. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't shaking or anxious the way I might have been 3 years earlier. I was something closer to curious. Curious what she thought was going to happen. I washed my hands, took off my apron, and walked out. She was sitting with the coffee she'd ordered. I noticed she hadn't touched it, and a leather folder on the table in front of her. She looked older. A little softer around the edges, but her eyes were the same. Appraising, like she was calculating something. "Beverly," I said. I didn't sit down immediately. "June." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit, please. We need to talk." I sat. She looked around the room slowly, the way people do when they're trying to seem unimpressed but can't quite manage it. The afternoon light was coming through the big front windows. The room was warm, smelled like cardamom and vanilla, every table full. She couldn't pretend it wasn't good. "It's done well," she said finally. "Thank you." A pause. Then she opened the leather folder and removed a document. She placed it squarely in front of me and folded her hands over it. "Aaron is struggling," she said. Her voice was carefully neutral. "He started a catering company 2 years ago. It hasn't found its footing. He has investors who are concerned." I said nothing. A partnership between your brand and his company would stabilize things significantly. The association would reassure his investors. You have the reputation. He has the operational capacity. She tapped the folder once. "It's actually a very sensible arrangement." I looked at the document without picking it up. "What's the percentage?" 40. I looked up. 40% of what I've built. To Aaron. For a catering company that hasn't found its footing. She didn't flinch. "For the good of the family." "We're not family anymore, Beverly. We divorced. You were family. You benefited from that." I sat back. Something about the way she said it. The absolute confidence of it. The belief that those years of Sunday dinners and cold silences and undermining comments somehow added up to a debt I owed. It almost made me laugh. Benefited how, exactly? She waved her hand. 3 years of support. Introductions. The family name. You told people your involvement with the bakery, I said. You had no involvement. June. Her voice dipped lower. Familiar register. The one she used when she was about to say something meant to sting. You are going to sign this. I looked at her steadily. Why would I do that? She picked up her coffee finally, took a measured sip and set it down. Because I have been patient. Because I have let this go on long enough. And because, if you don't, she glanced around the room, then back at me, I have a conversation I'm prepared to have with the hotel group you supply. About certain things regarding your business practices. The table between us was very quiet. My wholesale contract with the hotel group was significant. It was approximately a third of my monthly revenue at Midtown. Losing it would hurt. Beverly watched my face. You've built something real here, she said. Don't be foolish enough to let pride cost you everything. I was quiet for a moment. Then I smiled. And she didn't understand a smile. I could see that. She thought it meant I was wavering, calculating, coming around. She leaned back slightly, like she'd already won. All right, I said. Let's talk about a partnership. Her shoulders relaxed. Good, I'm glad you're being practical. I want to do this properly, though, I said. A decision this significant, I'd want my team to hear it. My investors, my managers, my legal advisor. If we're entering a formal agreement, everyone should understand the terms at the same time. It's cleaner that way. She nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. I have a standing meeting Thursday evenings. Weekly business review. Can you and Aaron be there? 7 o'clock? She picked up the folder and slid it back into her bag. We'll be there. I stood and she stood with me. She looked around the room one more time. It really is a lovely space, she said. There was something almost wistful in it. Thank you, I said. I'll see you Thursday. I walked her to the door. After she left, I stood in the entryway for a moment. Then I went back to the kitchen, found my manager, and told him I needed to make a few phone calls. There was something Beverly didn't know. Something I'd never mentioned to anyone in Aaron's family, because it had never come up. Because I had built this business quietly and carefully and without any of them. 2 years ago, when Aaron's catering company launched, one of my wholesale contacts had called me. He'd worked briefly with Aaron's operation and had some concerns, financial concerns. He'd wanted to give me a heads up in case Aaron approached me about any kind of collaboration. I had thanked him and made a note of it. Then I'd passed that note to my attorney, who had made her own inquiries. Because that's what you do when someone who once tried to take half of what you built launches a new venture and starts looking for lifelines. What my attorney had found was not nothing. Aaron's catering company had 3 investors. 2 of them had been quietly trying to pull out for 6 months. The reason? Inconsistencies in the accounting. Money going into operational expenses that didn't match actual vendor invoices. Not enormous amounts, but consistent. The kind of pattern that suggested a habit. I had done nothing with this information for 2 years. I hadn't called the investors. I hadn't spoken to anyone. I'd simply kept it in a file and gone about my business. But Beverly had walked into my shop and threatened the thing I'd spent 6 years building. And that changed the calculation. On Thursday evening, the conference room above the Midtown location was full. My head pastry chef was there. Both my managers, my accountant, and Patricia Cross, who had worn her pearl earrings and brought a colleague. 3 of my investors who held minority stakes were also present. 2 of them had driven in from out of town. Aaron arrived at 6:55. I hadn't seen him in nearly 2 years. He looked like a man who'd been under pressure for a while, a little thinner, a little careful in the eyes. Beverly came in behind him, the leather folder under her arm. She scanned the room and looked slightly surprised by how many people were there. But she sat down with the composure of someone who had decided to be confident regardless of circumstances. I came in at 7 exactly. The room settled. Thank you all for being here, I said. I called this meeting because a significant business proposal has been brought to me and I want to handle it with complete transparency. Everyone in this room has a stake in the health of this company, and I believe you all deserve to understand what's on the table. Beverly nodded, as if this were simply the professional due diligence she'd expected. Aaron opened his folder. "The proposal is straightforward," he said. "My company and this brand would enter a formal partnership. I bring operational infrastructure and capital connections. In exchange, 40%, one of my investors said, reading from the summary I'd circulated before the meeting. Aaron paused. "That's the proposed equity transfer, yes." Patricia set a folder on the table. "Before we discuss the terms," she said, "I want to share some information about the proposed partner's existing business that I believe is relevant to this room." Aaron's jaw tightened. "That's not necessary." "It's entirely necessary," Patricia said pleasantly. She was always pleasant. It was one of her most effective qualities. Her colleague opened a laptop and connected it to the display screen. What appeared on the screen was an accounting summary. Vendor invoices on one side, logged expenses on the other. The gap between them, highlighted in yellow. Beverly looked at the screen, then at Aaron, then back at the screen. "This is a review of financial records from the catering company's last 18 months of operation," Patricia said. "Specifically, the pattern of expense reporting relative to documented vendor payments." One of Aaron's investors, a man I recognized from his LinkedIn photo, one of the two who'd been trying to exit, leaned forward in his seat. Aaron stood up. "This is a setup," he said quietly. I looked at him. "You came to my shop and threatened my business. You asked me to sign over 40% of what I built because your company is struggling. Before anyone in this room considers that proposal, they deserve to know why it's struggling." Beverly's face had gone very still, not the confident stillness of a woman in control, the stillness of someone recalculating everything. "Aaron." Her voice was low. "What is she showing?" He didn't answer her. Patricia continued. "We have shared these records with the two investors in this room. We have also provided copies to a forensic accounting firm that was engaged independently. We are not making legal claims this evening. We are simply ensuring full transparency, which I understand is what was requested." Aaron's investor stood up. He looked at Aaron for a long moment. Then he picked up his copy of the summary and walked out of the room without speaking. Aaron looked at me. His expression had moved through several things and landed somewhere I hadn't seen on him before. Not anger exactly, something more like the look of a person who realizes the ground they were standing on was always different from what they thought. "You kept this," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "I keep good records," I said. "It's how I've run this business from the beginning." Beverly put the leather folder on the table. She didn't push it forward this time. She just rested her hand on it. "June," she started. "Beverly," I said. "Not unkindly. I think we're done here." She didn't move for a moment. Then she picked up the folder, put it in her bag, and stood. She looked around the room at my managers, my investors, Patricia with her pearl earrings, and then she looked at me. There was a long pause. "You've done well for yourself," she said. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I was ever going to get from her. I understood that. "I know," I said. They left. Aaron first, then Beverly, her heels quiet on the stairs. The room stayed still until we heard the front door close below. Then my head pastry chef exhaled loudly and said, "Well," and the table broke into something that wasn't quite laughter but was close to it. Patricia gathered her folders with the efficiency of someone who had many more meetings to attend. As she passed me, she patted my arm once, briefly, the way she always did when things had gone exactly as they were supposed to. Later, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in the conference room for a few minutes. The city was doing its quiet Thursday night thing outside the windows. Down below, the bakery was dark, chairs up on the tables, the display cases empty and clean. I thought about the notebook I'd kept under my bed, the floor plans I'd sketched, the 4 a.m. mornings and the months I'd paid everyone else first, the Sunday dinners where I'd smiled and said nothing while Beverly implied I wasn't quite enough. I wasn't angry. I want to be clear about that. I was something past anger, something quieter and more permanent. The feeling of having stood exactly where you're supposed to stand and let the whole thing unfold the way it was always going to. I turned off the conference room light and walked downstairs through my bakery, past the proofing racks and the big marble prep table and the wall of photographs near the door at opening day, The magazine spread, the staff party we threw after our first profitable quarter. I locked the front door behind me. The Midtown street was warm and unhurried. I stood there for just a moment. Then I walked to my car, and I went home. I still think about the look on Beverly's face when she said, "You've done well for yourself." Not with warmth, not with regret, just a kind of flat acknowledgement, like she was reading a number off a receipt. That was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get, and I made my peace with that a long time before she walked through my door. Here's what I've come to understand about the years I spent building this. The 4 a.m. mornings, the months I paid my staff, before I paid myself. The Sunday dinners where I smiled and said nothing while someone implied I wasn't quite enough. None of that was wasted. Every single part of it was the work. Not just the work of building a business, but the work of becoming someone who couldn't be rattled by a leather folder slid across a table. Beverly thought she was threatening me. What she didn't realize was that she was walking into something I'd spent 6 years constructing, not just a bakery, but a record. Every loan document in my name, every vendor contract, every payroll log, every quiet note passed to my attorney when something felt off. I didn't keep those records because I was planning for a confrontation. I kept them because that's what it means to run something honestly. Integrity isn't a strategy, it's just how you operate every day. And then one day it turns out to be the most powerful thing in the room. What Aaron never understood, and what Beverly still doesn't, I think, is that I was never competing with them. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just doing the work. And the work, done consistently and without shortcuts, has a way of compounding in ways that people who cut corners can never quite predict or outrun. I think about the version of me who sat at that Sunday dinner 3 years ago and said no. She was scared, honestly. She knew what saying no was going to cost her. She said it anyway. That's the part I'm most proud of. Not the second location, not the wholesale accounts, not the moment the auditor walked in. It's that one quiet no, said to a room full of people who expected yes, said by someone who had very little leverage and said it anyway because it was true. There's something that happens when you make a decision from your actual values instead of your fear. Things align in ways you couldn't have planned. Patricia found what she found because I'd kept honest records. The investor walked out because the numbers told a story that couldn't be argued with. None of that was luck. It was the accumulation of small choices made correctly over a long period of time. I locked the front door of my bakery that Thursday night and stood on the Midtown sidewalk and felt something I don't have a perfect word for. Not triumph, exactly. More like stillness. The feeling of having stood exactly where you were supposed to stand. I built this, quietly, carefully, without anyone's permission, and when someone tried to take it, I had already done everything right. That's the only kind of ready that actually matters.